Hey, we got a good episode this week. We had Dan Harden on the podcast. Dan is the CEO, founder, and principal designer of his studio Whipsaw. And Dan has also had quite a prolific career working at companies like Frog and Henry Dreyfuss Associates, and also interning for George Nelson. So we get into kind of the history and Dan's career, but also dip into some current topics and what Dan thinks of the future. It was a great episode, so hope you all enjoy it. And the sponsor this week is actually us, Minor Details. James and I finally got around to building a little web store. So we have embroidered hats, embroidered t-shirts, and a mug that says "Sweating the Small Stuff" in really small typeface. So it's a great way if you all want to support the podcast and get a little something in return. We really appreciate it. You can check that out at minordetailspodcast.com/shop. And we're still running our affiliate link with Vissoon. They create amazing keyshot assets for designers like you and I who probably don't have the time to, dig through some, GrabCAD website to find the right thing and put the right materials on. All this stuff is just drag and drop. It makes sure renders look amazing. I've used it in the past, and it's great. They've expanded its materials and decorations. I think they just recently released a bunch of plants, which looks really cool. So check them out and use our affiliate link, vissoon.io/minor details. It's also in the description. It really helps us out, and we do appreciate everyone who's used our affiliate link already. So thank you so much. And you all know the deal. Give us that like, give us that subscribe, 5 stars, thumbs up on YouTube, comment on YouTube, hit the bell icon, and yeah, let's hear that intro by Kyoshi the Kid. Hey, welcome to Minor Details. I'm Nick.
And I'm Dan.
And we're 2 designers in the big city, sweating the small stuff.
You always do this?
Yeah, we always wipe our brow.
That's what we do when we're designing, right?
Yeah.
I mean, I'm constantly sweating the small stuff. This is what I still do this.
Amazing.
Yeah, it's all about the details. That's why I wanted to do your podcast. Because it said minor details, and I would argue that every detail is pretty major. Well, so I think you need a shift here.
You know what's funny, Dan, is when James and I were starting the podcast, we were going over names, and James wanted to call it Major Minor Details. And I was like, it's too long, James. We got to cut it down. Okay. But maybe we should just call it Major Details. Maybe you're right.
Yeah.
We're super excited to have Dan Harden on the podcast today. Dan has a amazing career working for some incredible companies, working in consultancy. Started his career interning around for, I believe you interned for HP, George Nelson, and then you moved and worked for Henry Dreyfuss Associates, and for Frog, you became the president and VP of design at Frog. So you worked at Frog for 10 years or a decade around there, and eventually started your studio in 1999, was it?
It was 24 years ago, like 2 weeks ago.
Right. So you've been doing that for the majority of your career. So you're probably one of the most decorated designers we've had on the pod. So I'm excited to get into it. There's so many good stories. I'm excited to hear them. So welcome to the pod.
I'm happy to be here. I heard about your podcast, and I like your studio. I love being surrounded by all these little design knickknacks, I'll call it, because you have so many little 3D printed things up here. It's cool. Yeah. It's cool.
Thanks, Dan.
Nice.
So yeah, just to start out the podcast, I know you have your own podcast and you've been interviewed many times, and I definitely want to get into some topics later on, but we like to kind of share a bit with our listeners of your background, kind of how you got into design, and then I'm curious, to hear about these stories working for George Nelson or at Frog, kind of during the Steve Jobs era. So how did you kind of get into design? How did you figure out, like, at what age? And
I guess starting around 8 or 9 years old, I was drawing everything. I was taking things apart. I was just fascinated by my world. I was very observant.
Yeah.
I didn't know what I wanted to do, of course. But when you are freely expressing yourself, even as a kid, if you're curious and you are secure, especially in your family, and I had amazing parents that encouraged me all the time about my creative meanderings. Yeah, believe me, some of them got dangerous.
Okay. How so?
Oh, well, I was fascinated by things that move.
Okay.
So I was making go-karts and mini bikes and
nice.
attempted to make a helicopter.
Okay.
A real one that I sat on.
That's crazy.
Yeah.
Did it fly?
But no.
Okay.
It almost killed me. I made one go-kart that went about 65 miles an hour. This is before you wore even bike helmets. So, it was truly dangerous.
Wow. Okay.
And then I was really interested in pyrotechnics too. So that got a little crazy. But, when I found out what industrial design was, it was just one of my first epiphanies. It was like, oh, wait a minute. Art, science, engineering, it's a combination of all of these. I was just so turned on instantly about this potential. And I went to the University of Cincinnati. Luckily, they have a co-op program, so I was exposed during work. During school, I could work.
Yeah.
And my first job was actually at Richardson Smith.
Okay.
I'm going to doubt that many of your listeners know that company.
Yeah, I do not.
But at the time, they were the best design firm in this country.
Wow. Okay.
And if you ask some of the more seasoned veterans in the design world, they're like, oh yeah, Richardson Smith. I mean, they had all the great clients. There was something about that that just lit me up. I could watch the designers there and easily imagine, like, I can do this. So it was just, I'll never forget that. It was just such an eye-opening experience for young Dan to see that. And they threw me right in the pit. I was drawing, rendering, making models, figuring stuff out. I'm just kind of a maker and a figure-outer. And, I still rely on my imagination. It is my currency. It is my highest state is when I am on my feet, thinking creatively, certainly thinking out of the box, and just being myself.
Yeah. Yeah. Being in that flow state. That's a beautiful thing for sure. What about when you also interned for George Nelson?
Yeah.
Which is obviously a pretty famous designer, worked a lot with furniture. So I'm curious kind of your experience there as well. This was all during your time at school, I assume.
Yeah, I was, I think my fourth year of school is a 5-year course in Cincinnati. So I wanted to work for one of the most famous designers in the world. Right. So I found George Nelson's number in the Yellow Pages. Okay.
And the Yellow Pages, wow.
Yeah, in the Yellow Pages. And I picked up the phone and called George Nelson. I said, is Mr. Nelson there? I got to the VP there, Dan Lewis, who looked at my portfolio and he said, well, where did you work before? I said, Richardson Smith. And he said, okay, kid, call me back tomorrow. Okay. Unbeknownst to me, his roommate in college was the guy I worked for at Richardson Smith.
Oh, okay.
So he called me back the next day. He said, yep, you're in. Come on board.
Nice. Oh, that's
George.
Nice.
George, however, was not. He wasn't very approachable.
Interesting.
He was. He must have been. I don't know, maybe late 70s or 80 when I started working with him. But there was something about him. Obviously, his history was extraordinary.
Right.
And you learn about people like him and Charles Eames. He worked with Charles Eames quite a bit. But I decided to find out what makes him tick. I did decide, even though I was pretty young working there, I was like, I have to figure this guy out.
Right.
I'm here for a certain amount of time.
For sure.
And this is a really beautiful story. But I noticed that George was leaving the office every day at 4 o'clock. And I didn't know, where's he disappearing to? He wasn't taking his coat or anything. He was
Did
just
he come
walking
back?
out. So one day I was like, well, I'm going to follow him. Okay. And he was going to the restroom.
This is how the interns get fired.
Yeah, I know. So he was going to the restroom where he had cigarettes and a Mr. Coffee hidden behind the toilet. I am not kidding. Because his wife, who was the office manager, prevented him from smoking and drinking coffee in the office for his health. He wasn't the healthiest guy.
Okay.
So he would stay in that bathroom. It overlooked Gramercy Park.
Yeah.
It's on Central Park South. And it was on the 18th floor. I'll never forget this. So I followed him in the restroom, this little intern. And I was like, hey, Mr. Nelson, you mind if we just talk about design one day?
Yeah.
And he's like, no, kid, come over here. So he would always lift the window all the way open.
Okay.
And we'd be looking out at New York City. And that was the beginning of my discourse with him, which lasted my whole internship. I would meet him in the bathroom.
Wow. Okay.
Every other day when he wasn't working me to the bone to just talk about design philosophy.
Yeah.
And at that time, I was very optimistic about design, as I am today, but I wasn't realistic about it.
Mm-hmm.
Who is when you're that age?
Yeah.
He alarmed me about the environment, about the responsibility that designers have.
Yeah.
He kind of shook me, but it really shook me into an awareness about what design was all about. It was different than what I thought or expected after joining him.
Right.
But it rang true, and it still rings true to me. I still hear his voice in my mind every once in a while.
Yeah. What were some of the specific things he would mention to you? I guess this probably relates.
He was very anti-consumerism.
Okay.
He was a sustainable designer way before his time.
Right.
He would use bad words looking out at New York City, and he would do a big hand swipe about like what all this blank was. And he was critical of almost everything. He was critical about clients too. And he became pretty cynical about clients, about having to listen to clients and adhere to systems or formula. He was bucking the system even at his old age. It was so great when I look back on it, especially at the time, I guess I didn't realize how rare he was or how rare that perspective was, especially that he had. It was interesting enough when I think about it retroactively. It's refreshing today.
Yeah.
And just really loved the experience, loved the man. Sadly, 2 years after I was there, he passed away.
That's great insight. He's quite a famous designer, so must have been.
I think when you're especially a young designer, or even when you've been doing this for a while, you have to look for any source you can get for your inspiration. Mm-hmm. And it happens at the most unusual of times. You might be walking down the street and something hits you, just not literally, but
right, an idea.
Frame of mind, an idea, or you meet someone that you didn't expect, and you learn. You change your perspective. Design is constantly about changing perspectives. Yeah, thinking about things in new ways. That's why I've been able to stay so darn passionate about this field for as long as I have.
Right.
It keeps me young.
Right.
Literally, it keeps me young.
That's
I wake up in the morning, it's all about creativity. By the time I fall asleep at night, I'm still creating.
That's amazing. That's the dream, right? What about your time at Henry Dreyfuss? So after you graduated college, you went, I believe, did you have a stint in Europe?
I did, yeah. Okay. So when I was in college, all of my classmates would thought that I was like a little mini Mario Bellini. They were like, because I just loved European design. Yeah. I was really intrigued by what was going on in Italy, Germany, France, England at the time. Mm-hmm. As a matter of fact, that little Valentine typewriter,
I have the Sass out here in the background. Mm-hmm.
So yes, I got a one-way ticket to Europe and tried to get a job in England, and then they threw me out because this was 83. So they threw me out very quickly, put me on a plane back to France. I talked my way out of it, actually. Okay. So
where were you trying to go in England?
I was trying to get a job.
Just anywhere?
Yeah, at a cool consulting firm. And at customs, they were like, oh, kid, what are you doing here? Well, I'm going to work.
Okay.
Well, what do you do, kid? I'm a designer.
As you do when you're young.
Yeah, I had my portfolio on my back.
Yeah.
It's like, you want to see my portfolio? It's a customs agent. Come with us. Yeah, they have very high.
Turned you around.
They had high unemployment rates at that time. Anyway, I did at that time actually. I got this pretty cool job down in a town called Esslingen, but there was a design exhibit in Stuttgart that I will never forget. I was able to see an exhibit with like every great German designer. And I'm scanning everything, taking it all in, looking for little seeds of inspiration.
Right.
And I kept seeing this company called Esslinger Design.
Okay.
Esslinger Design eventually became Frog
Right.
Design,
Yeah,
but
of course.
Hartmut Esslinger founded that company.
Yeah.
So with two other guys. But I was like, I had already gotten a job in a small consulting firm, but I got on a bus to go see this company called Esslinger Design. Got off the bus, and Hartmut actually picked me up in this very fast little sports car.
What was it? It was a Porsche?
No, it was a very souped up BMW.
Okay, nice.
Yeah, very fast. He's kind of and that we instantly had this in common. I like cars too.
Awesome.
And obviously I worked there for a long time, so I got to know him very, very well. And so that was one of the things we had in common. But at that time, it wasn't my time for the Frog experience. I had a job. It was an interview, but it was more like a get to know one another interview.
Right.
And at that time he said, well, we just met this guy named Steve Jobs, and we're probably going to be doing this work for Apple. And I'm like, oh yeah, sure, I know. That's a cool company.
And this is in the 80s?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. This is before all that Frog work for, the Snow White program, we called it.
Pre-Snow White, okay.
But so anyway, he's like, well, this is going to happen sooner or later, and we're going to want you to join the company. But I didn't have the patience to hang around, so I came back to New York City, got a job at Henry Dreyfuss Associates, worked there for a while. It was wonderful. That's where I really learned the business of design.
Yeah.
How to write a proposal, how to sell myself, how to sell the work. There's a difference. You have to sell yourself as a designer, but the work, you need to make that work saleable. You need to make it communicate on its own. It has to be its own little emissary of values. You need to impart it with the values, but it needs to sell too. So
yeah.
I learned a lot of the fundamentals of how to be a designer, a whole designer, not just a designer the way that we might define what good design is. In order to succeed in this profession, you need to be a lot of things.
Right. Good at business, good at marketing. Yeah. A lot of different facets.
Anyway, it was a great place to be. But I always remembered, I was like, oh, but I met that cool company down in the Black Forest.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden they were
the big
all of a sudden the big dog.
Yeah.
And everybody wanted a job at Frog. So I called him up, and Hartmut basically said, where have you been? We've been waiting for you to get out here. So I moved out right away. And
this is, well, hang on. I want to pause for a second. Before we get to Frog, I just want to hear a little about Henry Dreyfuss Associates, just because I think it's interesting. I was reading into it a little bit. Henry Dreyfuss passed away before you started there.
Yeah.
And so his consultancy lived on after his death. And I'm curious how that affected the business and how you all, I guess, carried his values on. I don't know. I kind of looked it up, and I don't really see Henry Dreyfuss Associates around today, but it seems like there was some activity in the early 2000s. I just want to maybe tie that up and curious about that, if you know anything.
Henry Dreyfuss had hired a lot of very good people that he brought under his wing, and he had a team of associates.
Okay.
They were directors, I think, when he was alive.
Yeah.
And there were like 5 or 6 of them.
Okay.
When he passed, and he did that by design, by the way.
I was reading that as well, which is a crazy story. Yeah.
Yeah. He left it in the hands of some very qualified people that ran the company. So when I joined, I was working for these 5 very good designers and good business leaders. So the values were, I think, very much carried on by these 5 individuals. And they each sort of they were running different accounts like AT&T, John Deere, Hyster, American Airlines, and many others. So as a designer, I had to, as soon as I got there, I kind of sized up which partners I liked and the accounts that I wanted to work on.
Okay.
And yeah, I really got into it.
Which brands did you get to work on?
I wanted to work on AT&T because I was really interested in electronics and technology. And at the time, AT&T was kind of the it company. Not only telephones, but they were producing all kinds of computers, telecom, networking systems. And I also like Polaroid because I like handheld products. I've always liked cameras
That's
and
fun.
machines and, you know, things that are multi-sensory especially. I didn't particularly want to work on tractors.
Okay. Not into the tractor. That's
I
all
did
good.
some work on planes. We had Falcon Jet as a client.
Oh, wow. Okay.
I did some razors for American Safety Razor and some medical work. But I was a little whippersnapper back then.
Yeah.
So I still am. So they kind of let me do whatever I wanted, which was
That's awesome.
really, really nice of
That's
them.
amazing.
And Don Gennaro, he's still around, man. He's like 98 years old or something. And I wrote him a note.
And he's one of the associates?
He was one of these, he was the top guy when I worked there. Kind of an intimidating guy, really tough. But he liked me, and I wrote him out of the blue like 2 years ago. Hey, Don, you remember me?
Yeah.
He wrote me instantly the most eloquent letter saying, absolutely, I remember you. You were so great to work with. I'm so happy to see you just stuck with it.
That's
amazing. It was
amazing.
really
I love
really
that.
neat. So he was one of my early mentors.
Oh yeah, that's a great insight into the Henry Dreyfuss Association. And I will say, definitely look up the history, because I think it is interesting how Henry passed, and sad at the same time. So you moved to California, your Frog era.
Yeah.
I'm really interested in this because this is where we get into some of the Steve Jobs stories and hearing all about that. So, and you worked for Frog for correct me, about a decade, if not more.
10 years.
So that's
actually a couple months less, so 9 years, 10 months or something. Yeah.
And during their heyday, I would say too, they were doing some amazing products then.
Yeah, from 89 to 99 is when I was there.
So yeah, what was the
what was that like?
Experience like, especially moving up because you became the president / VP of design, or was that separate things that you?
They were both. It was a progression.
Okay.
You don't become the president and the vice president. That's
Right,
a problem.
right.
That means you're messing something up.
Then,
I had always, especially after meeting them, like several years before, I just had such a reverence for what they were doing.
Mm-hmm.
I just really loved this idea. Form follows emotion. What does that mean?
Yeah.
I was feeling that. I designed like that very much. It was, there was a respect for what people feel, not just how they work and breaking down functional human factors problems, which is obviously very important. But it's more than just design thinking. It's design feeling and seeing as well. And Frog really got that. And it resonated with me so much that I was like, okay, I can only work here. So, my first day, I remember Hartmut saying, okay, well, you're going to be working with the next computer account with Steve Jobs.
Right.
You're going to be meeting him every Friday at 3 o'clock. You're going to be meeting with Pierluigi Zappacosta, the founder of Logitech. And you're going to be meeting with the founder of Sun Microsystems, Andy Bechtelsheim.
I got to catch my breath. That was
Well, believe me, I was the same way. I was like, okay. Hartmut and we still have a great relationship, and I was like, yeah, just bring it on. Let me do this.
Yeah.
I was ready. Quite frankly, I was ready, and I've never been afraid about design or expressing myself creatively. I feel comfortable there. There's some things in technology that we deal with now where it's like so esoteric and so deeply learned that it takes time to understand what you're designing for, especially certain specific vertical markets. But the design thing I'm comfortable with. So yeah, throw me in front of Steve Jobs. He wasn't the nicest guy in the world, let's be honest. He wasn't. I saw him berate marketing people and engineers especially.
Yeah.
Design had a certain reverence to him. He was a lot friendlier to designers. I didn't realize at the time. I just thought, he's going to treat me like everybody else. I was always a little bit nervous about it. If you didn't have butterflies going in before you met him, then you didn't do your homework.
Oh boy.
So he was just very, very sharp. He would see the inadequacies of your concept right away.
Yeah. And were you working on the next cube? Was that the one, or was there some other variations in there?
It was everything after that.
Okay.
So there was a whole line of peripherals, keyboards, mice,
Right.
the new RISC workstation, we called it, the monitors systems, and the advent of flat screen monitors and things like this.
Okay.
So, but, he was very much involved in every detail. He would come into every design meeting. He was there, every Friday afternoon. He was usually a little bit late.
Okay.
So I'd work with a couple of the engineering directors, and they'd be, okay, are you ready? You have your models? You say, yeah, you had to be prepped.
Yeah.
Be ready to go.
Right. For sure.
But he did love design, and he would get excited when you'd show him something that was different. It was even a little bit outrageous, challenging. He liked design that was unique and thoughtful at the same time.
Yeah.
Sometimes they're different.
Yeah, for sure. There's also, I was reading too, you have this story about how, was it Steve or Larry that dropped your model and it shattered into a
Where
million
did you read
pieces?
that?
I think you had it on a blog, on your blog post or something, but I kind of want to hear that story.
Oh, okay.
Sounds like a funny story.
So I had done, it's so funny, everybody likes to hear these stories about
Yeah.
Steve Jobs and Larry Ellison, some of these real characters in
Yeah.
technology.
You have to remind
After-
us too, what is Larry Ellison, what was he famous for?
Yeah, he founded Oracle.
Okay, Oracle.
Yeah, one of the biggest software companies in the world, and he's one of the richest guys in the world too. He's
Yeah.
like number 2 or 3 in the United States,
Okay.
something like this.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
he's quite a character. So I'd finished all this stuff for Next because Next then sold ultimately to Apple.
Right.
But Next shifted from hardware more into software.
Okay.
So our work with Next kind of slowed down. By the mid-90s, we got Oracle as a client. And Larry had already hired a bunch of design firms and chewed them up and spit them out.
Okay.
So his
Didn't make the cut.
no, so his lieutenant called me up and said, "This is likely going to happen. We have never worked with Frog before, but expect this."
Okay.
this was too much. I couldn't believe it. So I'm like, "Okay, fine. What's the design problem?"
Mm-hmm.
He described a line. He wanted to create products that were not like standalone computers. He wanted to use the World Wide Web to act as a computer,
Okay.
a terminal,
Yeah.
a station. We take it all for granted right now.
Right.
Of course. Brilliant idea. He wasn't the only one that had that idea.
Yeah.
So I started working with Larry personally, as just the two of us, to design a futuristic line of computers called a network computer. And it got to a point where we had developed about 5 products conceptually.
Mm-hmm.
And he said, okay, for the next reveal, we're going to have a special reveal. I want you to come to dinner. Just come to dinner. Bring all the models.
Okay.
So I'm like, oh, okay, another trip over to Larry. We only met at Larry's house. So pulled up into got through security.
At his house?
At his house. Big,
Okay.
beautiful place. Yeah. Big, long
Right.
garage.
Okay.
McLaren F1.
Okay.
We're
Nice.
talking like
Okay.
really beautiful. As soon as I pulled in, I see a big silver Mercedes-Benz with the license plate Pixar. There's only one guy that could be driving that car.
Right.
I thought, oh man, Steve is here. I already knew that he was a tough customer and super critical.
Mm-hmm.
Steve is hypercritical.
Yeah.
And if it's somebody else's work, not something that he sponsored, he's going to be extra critical. So I knew right away I was on the block for criticism. So anyway, I'm a little bit late to the party.
Oh, no.
Because my models were still drying.
Oh, of course. Oh, no.
And my
Not
model
the
maker
wet
said, this particular one is very fragile.
Okay.
If you lift this display up, it was kind of like a phone, it was a communication device.
Okay.
Don't drop the display back. Don't let go of the model. So after dinner, and there were 4 of us at this dinner table. There's Larry's assistant, Steve, and I. Okay, now what am I doing at that table? I'm a designer. These guys are these brilliant technologists, right? I was super humbled. I'm like, oh my God, what am I going to say here? But it's kind of like if you're in a meeting when other people are talking a different language, and then every once in a while you hear like Nick, or Dan, one of these. I'm being a little facetious, but we were talking about the future of computers, and we were having fun with it. And then suddenly Larry says, okay, get out our models. We got to show Steve. So I bring them out one by one. Of course, Steve starts criticizing them. Larry brings this one out that was still smelled like lacquer.
No.
He opened it up. It literally exploded. He dropped the display back, and it came apart in about 20 pieces. And they were falling off the edge of his dining room table. Steve was right here. Steve was 3 feet in front of me. As Larry was talking about these models, he was talking about the future of computers and using these models as a prop. Mm-hmm. But what I found so odd is he never stopped his cadence of speaking for 1 second to say, whoops, sorry, that $30,000 model I just broke, whoops. No, he just kept talking. I'm thinking, am I in a dream? What is going on? Like reaching over, like this, picking up parts, putting them in the box, never saying anything. Okay, maybe this just didn't happen. Steve didn't say anything either.
That is a wild story.
And the wild part was when Larry said to Steve, I think you should consider going back to Apple because they need your help. Mm-hmm. And Steve just gave it a pause. He actually, I could see his mind like going, it wasn't the first time somebody said that to him, obviously. Right.
But he was thinking on it.
But he was thinking. Yeah. And then he said, I have to finish this movie that I'm working on at Pixar.
Toy Story.
Toy Story came out 2 months after this meeting. So, and when I think he mentioned it's something about toys, I'm like, what is Steve Jobs doing working on a movie about toys? And he told that to us. I'm like, what? It didn't fit. And then of course you see Toy Story, like, oh my God, innovation beyond belief.
Incredible.
Yes, I mean that's just one of those career stories, and I was pinching myself when I left his house that night. I realized that it was just something I'll never forget. Thank you for asking. I don't like to. I don't tell that story very often. It's kind of like a personal thing that
I mean, it feels like you hear a lot of stories about Steve Jobs, and they are very impactful, and you can really tell that the man was an incredible influence on this world and our future. So, as many flaws as he had, he certainly created an incredible future for us.
Oh, without a doubt. I mean, for designers, he's had a huge impact. Yeah. He's as impactful as any great architect or industrial designer, for sure, if not more so.
Yeah. What other kind of products did you get to work on at Frog? Were there any other standouts that you really were passionate about during your time there? And I guess also, how did you feel about once you achieved, VP and president status? Kind of what were you? I guess this was kind of your first time moving up the ranks of design and becoming more of a visionary and less of a in the workshop carving foam, or maybe you continue to do that. I'm kind of curious to hear that transition.
Yeah. The transition felt very organic and very natural. The Frog was pretty casual, as Whipsaw is. I mean, it's we try not to have too many levels. When I joined, it was a little bit unorganized. That company, Frog, was pretty unorganized. I came in. It needed leadership. It needed some attention. There were a lot of aspects of the company that were broken. I just wanted to focus on projects, quite honestly. I wanted to dive in and just design my butt off.
Right. As most designers do.
And I'm still that way.
Right.
Now I'm so, it's just like, I only want to work on the really cool stuff. Like I don't like
just
wasting.
Just do the fun parts and then
I don't
let
like wasting my
other
time
designers do the CAD and stuff.
Yeah. So, I just design. And I started to stand out in that company pretty quickly. And Hartmut saw that I was sincere in what I was trying to do. And so I think I just naturally advanced. One thing I just loved about working there and respect so much in him is he saw talent and he rewarded talent. Mm. And, I was like 30 years old, and he's like, he says in a meeting in front of a client, oh, Dan doesn't know, but I'm going to make him the vice president. I'm like, huh?
Your first time you're hearing about it. That's
it was just kind of like, that was the first time hearing it. But he had There's something very charming about the man.
Yeah.
Some designers, struggle with his communication style, or he could get angry sometimes. But he just wanted great work to happen. That's all. I get it. I totally get it. But his style was unusual. You had to figure it out. And some designers just couldn't take it.
Okay.
I happen to end up, he and I are very different, but we shared the same goal of creating design excellence and not letting anything get in the way of that. We had that in common. Our personal styles were very different, and we ended up figuring out how to work these style differences. So when I was with a client or was trying to win a client and I needed the European advantage, the accent, the thick German accent, the genius. Come on, man, I need your help to land this one. If he was working with or trying to win especially a Japanese or Korean client, he just confused them so much. So he would say to me, "Hey, Dan, come over here. I need your help to land this. I need the
friendly American.
The friendly American." So we were like point counterpoint.
Okay.
And very effective. We go in meetings and just crush it. And we could be very convincing. Now, we also recognized that we needed a bunch of really great people, so we started hiring. We started to grow the company. I remember bringing in so many interesting people. My gosh, we hired Brett Lovelady, who founded Astro. That was in 91 or 92. Brett, if you're listening, tell me what year that was. Then we brought Gadi Ahmet, the founder of New Deal Design.
Oh, wow. Okay.
We hired him in I want to say 94.
This is the SF hub.
Yeah. And then Yves Behar called me. He came over for an interview. I hired him.
Okay. Wow.
And so we were like a bunch of really,
You're really,
a bunch of badasses. I mean, we were like, somebody said to me at that time that IDEO was the symphony orchestra.
Okay.
And Lunar was the jazz band, and we were hard rock and roll.
Oh, I love it. That's amazing.
And I smiled at first. I thought, that's ridiculous. And I thought, yep, that was it.
Nice.
And that we were always contentious with one another. I mean, we challenged one another. I think when you're designing it, challenge is a good thing.
Yeah.
You need to be able to be comfortable when you're trying to really uncover something that's never been done before. It's okay to be contentious. It's all right. I encourage interaction. Go intellectual. Go deep. You can get weird. Get experimental. Just don't be afraid to be judged. Too many designers are afraid that they're not doing the cool thing or whatever. I don't understand that, quite frankly. You just have to try things. Just keep trying. Yeah. And support one another. Yeah. But also challenge one another.
That's incredible, decade of work at Frog.
Yeah, and it was just a matter of just keep growing the company, and it got to a point where, oh gosh, I worked on so many things. I remember coming from Dreyfus, getting to Frog, it was like stepping on a one of these walkway conveyors.
Oh, yeah.
But it was turned up a little too high.
Right, where you stumble a little bit.
I was like, are you kidding me? You want me, this much work you want me to do? Luckily, I loved it. I was ready to just tear it up. I was just, let's do this.
That's amazing.
When you have that kind of attitude about just about anything, no matter what profession you're in, you're going to make things happen. Yeah. And luckily, the culture supported that at that time. Those were the golden years of Frog. That was it. Mid-90s especially. Then we grew and we added software, and I kind of felt like I did my run there. Yeah. I met a lot of interesting people. I had the Rolodex of the gods. Somebody told me.
It sounds like it for sure. Yeah.
That was, and so it was just a matter of okay, well, the next thing is to start my own company. And I made a few calls to people that I had known, Cisco Systems, Creative Labs, Sonic Blue, which was Rio Audio, and a few other companies, Replay TV. So started working with people like Anthony Wood, the founder of Roku, did his first product. We did the first.
So the first Roku you worked on?
Yeah.
That's cool.
Anthony came in and he's like, what do you think of the name Roku? It's my sixth startup. Like, Anthony, you're asking me, dude, you've already, hey, this is your 6th one. It sounds good.
What were the other ones that he had started? Do you remember?
The one that I had worked on prior to that was Replay TV, which was a type of pre-streaming television. It was
like DVR? Was it DVR kind of?
It was kind of like a DVR.
Okay.
Yeah. But yeah, so right away, I mean, that was like jumping off of one conveyor belt onto another one that was made of titanium. And like this was, starting your own company, that's a whole different thing.
Yeah, and I kind of want to get into the details of that. So you started Whipsaw in 1999, and I'd love to first talk about the name, because I think it's a really great, I read it about it, but I think our listeners will enjoy the story behind the name. And then I also want to hear a bit the beginning of how you started. Was it just you at the beginning and you slowly grew, or did you have a nest egg that you were able to, save up and just go all in, or what was your kind of story there? So
yeah, well, first of all, I was driven by something that is very deep inside me. I just felt like I had to do this. Mm-hmm. And that notion actually started with my internships at Richardson Smith and George Nelson Associates. I also worked at HP as an intern, but it's a big corporation, and that's the only time I've ever worked for a corporation. It was 5 months at HP. I loved it. They gave me a ton of freedom, but it was a big corporation. Right. And it's like, man, I am not cut out for the bureaucracy and just, like having an employee number and a badge. It's just not me.
Yeah.
Not me. So I knew right away that was a good lesson to get early on. It's like, I'm a consultant. That's what I want to do. I need freedom. So I always knew I wanted to have my own firm. That's one thing. That's the most important thing. I did not do it for the money, although if you want to make a great living as a designer, you either have to own your own company or be a VP in a corporation and stick with it long enough.
Yeah.
Or third is to be an entrepreneur. Go make your own products.
Yep.
And hopefully one of them goes. Dyson's a good example. He was a designer.
For sure.
And he really made it go.
Yeah.
So it was more a matter of like having an attitude that I know I can make this happen, but it takes a lot of tenacity. You just have to tell yourself, okay, one step at a time. So find a good attorney, just in case you're going to need that kind of help with contracts or whatever. Find a great accountant. And in my case, I started at first alone. I was just designing in my dining room, my computer and drafting board and all the tools. But I'll never forget that feeling. It was just so liberating for me, having worked for other people, to suddenly, it was like popping my head out of a manhole, and I saw this horizon that went to infinity.
Yeah, all the possibilities.
I could do anything. Yeah. Anything I want as a designer. And I felt like at that point, I'd had enough experience where I could sell my work, sell myself. I had a portfolio that could get the work right away.
100%. Yeah, for sure.
It was kind of like, walking in with a weed whacker. It's just, it was just like, I'll never forget that feeling, the very beginning, this sort of nascent feeling like I know success will happen, but it isn't there yet. When you start from scratch,
right?
And there's a nervousness to that.
Yeah, for sure. I've always felt that like if you aren't a little nervous, you're not doing it right. You should always be like a little bit nervous, because that means you're pushing yourself.
Yeah, right. So to make it work, I fell back on what I knew how to do, and that was design products.
Yeah.
So I just stayed true and very focused on that. So when I would just propose to a company that we would do something for them, well, in that case, me, I just had to follow through on it.
Yeah.
And just get into what I love to do. And therefore, I didn't find it to be that difficult. The requests started to come in, and I brought in a friend of mine that was working at SGI. He had worked for Apple prior to that, Bob Rickamini, and I invited him in to be to run engineering.
Okay.
Because a few of the projects I was getting early on, there were engineering components to it. So that became important.
Yeah.
And then just adding, one project after the other. We didn't put up a website for the first year because I didn't want to just put a bunch of frog work on a website and say, there's a new company, Whipsaw.
Yeah.
But to get back to your earlier comment about Whipsaw, it's an unusual name.
Yeah.
Even then you needed an unusual name to stand out. I didn't want to be Harden and Associates.
Yeah.
What I witnessed at Dreyfus was a lot of collaboration, maybe too much, where they were always asking the client, what do you think?
Okay.
Well, can you choose? Which design would you choose on the wall? I'll never forget going up to Polaroid. And I already knew which the best direction was.
Right.
And
don't let the client choose the best design.
Yeah,
this is the one.
Yeah, exactly. And my boss said to me, well, Dan, you have really Polaroid. They want to choose. I'm like, well, they're in marketing. They don't know what to choose. That would be like me asking a doctor what's wrong with me. Well, what am I doing there at the doc's office if I'm going to determine that? So I never agreed with that. So it's almost too much collaboration. Yeah. But I recognize the importance of reciprocity and give and take. But I got to Frog, and it was kind of the opposite. It's like, here, client, this is your solution. I could see the benefits in that, but after being there 10 years, I really recognized and enjoyed the fact of working collaboratively with people. I think design is an exchange, a narrative between people and objects and emotions and activity, and you're trying your best to craft the best combination of elements so that you can get a result that is beautiful, that's important, that's meaningful, that's sustainable. This is your aim as a designer. So I've also liked harmony. I think design, generally speaking, should be harmonious. I mean, sometimes design wants to be, you need harmony with edge. Sometimes you want a design where it's like, I love this, it makes me feel good, but there's this other little annoying thing that's making the design really sticky.
Interesting.
It might be a detail. It might be a minor detail.
Okay.
It becomes major.
Dan, you're already great on the podcast. We always make the minor detail puns all the time. I love it.
Got it. Well, I love detailing, so I think that's. I mean, Charles Eames said that there is no such thing as the whole design. It's just a collection of details.
I love it.
So, but I don't quite believe only that, but I like creating balance and harmony. I love the tension between design and engineering, between art and science. Mm-hmm. I've always been fascinated by the romantic and the classical, and how do you balance these things? How do you know where to be on the spectrum from wild to mild? And the idea of a whipsaw, a long two-man saw. Somebody asked me whipsaw in 10 words. Whipsaw, two-man saw that epitomizes balance and cuts like hell.
Okay.
Was my answer.
I love it.
And so anyway, that it was a weird name that kind of stuck, and
it's great.
Nobody can pronounce it in Asia. It always comes out.
Oh, that's interesting.
Whipsaw.
Okay. Huh.
I'm always correcting.
You got the S and the P.
Whipsaw. Yeah.
And so you started to grow Whipsaw and eventually started working with some very big name clients. You have Google, Nike under your belt, Uber. I'm curious, is there any kind of standout product from your past, 24 years at Whipsaw that you felt that was like the most impactful product that you all have worked on?
Wow. We are very diverse,
mm-hmm.
and
you're doing a lot of UX stuff nowadays.
Yes.
Engineering as well, and you do the full suite of things.
We do, but we're also in a lot of diverse categories.
Mm-hmm.
Consumer electronics is where we started, pretty much, and computing. That led to networking. Then made the decision to get into medical in 2003. There was kind of an economic downturn at that time, and we really needed more diversity.
Yeah.
Then that led to life sciences. Then we decided to get into robotics. I want to say 12 years ago, we worked with Stanford Research Institute and did some robotic studies. Then, oh my gosh, we've gotten into so many wearables. We did the first wearable was the Nike Fuel Band.
Talk about Nike Fuel Band, because I think that one is a standout product to me. That feels like a really impactful product, at least from a consumer, right? I'm sure there was many.
I wouldn't call that as one of our most impactful, but it's an interesting story because Mark Parker at the time wanted the Livestrong band.
Okay.
To
those
be
were
alive.
really popular. Yeah.
You know, he wanted electronics in there.
Okay.
That would be able to measure biometric data and movement mostly. So they had this relationship with Astro Studios. So Astro did a kind of a vision piece for them that was, well, you know, it hadn't been developed. It was just like a starting point.
Right.
So Nike said, well, we need to develop this a lot further. So they looked out, they found us. There was a little competition for the continuation of that product to develop it. And we won that, and that was a difficult project.
Yeah.
Because it was very small. It had to do a lot. We wanted to engineer something that was truly extraordinary. There were a lot of innovations there, like 35 patents just on how things are manufactured there. There's like no air inside that.
Yeah.
We injection molded TPU on top of a circuit board.
That's insane.
For the first time, including over, the flow, hot plastic over the top of the LEDs, over the flex circuits, over the back housing of where the battery would sit. I mean, it was pretty radical. If you took one of those apart, it was really pretty radical.
And I think, does the USB connect as the clasp?
It does, yeah.
Yeah. So, there's so many kind of unique things that I would agree seemed very new at the time that maybe we take for granted now. But
yeah. We had a lot of that figuring out to do. Some of our earlier, so as far as like the standout things, some of the earlier stuff, the Rio Audio, the Leapfrog product line, the interactive kid toys, reading books. That was really fun. Worked a lot with Jim Margraf on that. That was really fascinating. Then we did this product line for Eton, these field radios, and that made a big wave. I mean, everybody was like, "Oh, that's it." That's the definition of what rugged design is. Then we did a baby bottle for a Deary. That was a lot of fun working on that because it was so organic and it was gentle and quiet. And we invented a new way of manufacturing a baby bottle, and we literally turned the problem upside down.
Yeah,
you filled it from the bottom, not the top, and it was soft and cuddly for both mom and baby. I mean, it was a game changer. It changed the industry,
and it was all silicone, right? Or
it wasn't silicone. The cycle time was
okay.
too long, so we worked with a materials company to invent a new material. We called it C-Flex.
Okay.
And it was mostly a combination of elastomeric materials with a little bit of silicone.
Okay.
Silicone is a thermoset, so it takes a little bit longer time, the cycle times. We wanted to speed that up, so the cycle time was more like 4 seconds in the tool.
Interesting.
Anyway, it was really, that was pretty remarkable at the time. Then we did a lot of work these different industries. Just fast forwarding, I think tonal was probably a big important product because it embodied so many of our disciplines all in one.
Yeah, tonal, I guess, is some sort of exercise
strength training system. Yeah,
you're better explaining it, and it has a huge display on it that you can. There's a whole UX element to that as well.
Yeah, it's UX, it's mechanical engineering, it's ID. It replaces a gym.
Yeah, and it combined all of your skill sets.
It combined everything,
yeah.
And it was a tough problem. What made it so fascinating to me is the fact that the founder of that company came over to my house with an electric motor that had a pulley with wire on it.
Okay.
And then that motor was connected to his computer, and he said, "Pull on this cable." I pulled on it, and he's like, "Do it again." That went from like 25 pounds to 100
right.
pounds. I'm like,
nice.
That's it.
Yeah.
Let's do this. So we conceptualized immediately and worked on that for like a year, and then 2.5, 3 years later it came out. Timing was pretty good because the pandemic was hitting right about then.
Yeah.
Everybody's dropping their gym subscriptions, so all of a sudden, there's tonal. It replaces a gym, literally. It is an electric motor controlled by software, so all of the weights are digital. It's smooth. It's quiet. It's the Tesla of gyms.
Yeah.
I mean, it is a completely different way of looking at the world. And for the fitness category, they were ready for that kind of innovation. And I was thrilled that so many people adopted that. It really made an impact on society. And it's selling well today. I mean, you turn on the television, you'll see LeBron James using it.
It's amazing. That's really cool. Dan, I want to maybe shift gears a little bit. I'm kind of curious from a business standpoint with Whipsaw, how have you kind of expanded the business in terms of, I'm sure you quote in various ways. I'm curious, like, do you work with startups on equity basis? I mean, obviously, a lot of times some startups may not have the capital to work with a big consultancy. There's all kinds of different ways to work. And also, I do want to get to Skrolla, because that seems like you are starting your own business on the side. So maybe you could speak to a little bit of that structure-wise.
Sure.
How you organize those things.
It's a great question. It's one that industrial designers and designers in general don't talk about enough.
Yeah.
So there's this whole misnomer. I'm amazed how little designers know about business.
Yeah.
It still amazes me, the questions I get around this.
Yeah.
First of all, most of our work is fee-based.
Mm-hmm.
And if you're a designer, you want to drive the value of what you do as a service up as high as you possibly can so that you can do the great work
For sure.
that client deserves. Sometimes design takes time, so you need to be very persuasive about, first, what is the fair value of what you're about to provide? We first establish that. What is this project worth?
Mm-hmm.
40% of our clients are startups. The rest are, Fortune 500 or Fortune 100 clients.
Yeah.
I kind of like the mid-sized companies. Oftentimes the great big companies are a little bit more difficult to work with because you have a lot of middle managers and you sometimes don't get to meet the CEO, so you're not exactly sure where they want to go and you're doing more guessing. When you're working with a startup, you're working with founders. You find your champion right away. You always have to have a champion on the client side. It's not just about you. If they can't pull it off, you're going to be a consultant. If they can't pull it off, well, your work doesn't matter.
Yeah.
What does matter is what you produce in the end, and they ship in the end.
Mm-hmm.
Industrial designers mass-produce products that people enjoy. Sometimes we'll do a vision piece, like our Raven chord piano, something that I wanted to do because I love music. Have you seen that?
Yeah, it's a beautiful piano. It has this kind of, I almost want to say like a spiral back to it that shows off the strings. It's really unique.
It's presenting the strings to the audience.
Mm-hmm.
So I call it a front projection upright piano.
Yeah.
It's what should have always been done, in my opinion.
Yeah.
Instead of this mysterious black box. We can talk about that later. But anyway, so sometimes you have to do a vision piece. But when you're working with startups, establish the fair value of what you're going to do. A lot of times they can't afford it.
Right.
So, and sometimes we believe in it so much where we tell them we don't want to charge for this.
Interesting.
We want to do this for stock.
Okay.
Occasionally we'll do it for only stock. Very occasionally.
I mean, that's like that. I feel like that is a really big risk. I mean, maybe once you're more established and you can take those risks on.
Yeah, and that's why you have to make sure that other parts of your business, whether you're
Right.
selling products on your own or you're just doing a really fine business with your fee-based clients, that you can afford to take that kind of risk.
Yeah.
That's great. That's a luxury when you can do that. It's more common, however, where we can provide a discount anywhere between 15 and 50% of
Right.
the discount in lieu of receiving shares. We can do warrants. Usually, sometimes you get preferred shares. You go for the top
Right.
every
Of
time.
course. Yeah.
Of course, if you're working with mid-sized companies or a public company, they're just like, oh, you want stock? Well, just go buy stock.
Yeah.
You're not going to get stock in
For
those
sure.
clients. So, you just have to know, like, when is right.
Yeah. And usually the larger companies can afford a project fee much more than a.
Usually, but not always.
Okay. Yeah.
Sometimes those marketing departments or engineering departments, that they get X amount to spend per year. And,
Right.
Some are ridiculous. Some are, I won't name them, but they'll come to you with like a project that should be 500,000. They're like, well, we have 50,000, Dan.
Okay.
Like, come on. You're X corporation, and that's design has got to be worth more than that.
Oh man.
On On the flip side, sometimes you have a startup that so badly wants you or just loves design, and they're willing to pay a lot for it.
Yeah.
So there are other cases when, and this is not as common as it was before, but instead of equity, you can get royalty.
Right.
If you feel as a designer that volume production will be likely, high volume will be likely, it's smart to do a royalty deal. But royalty deals are hard to hold together. They're like, since Oppenheimer's out, so it's like an unstable nucleus.
Okay.
So
did you watch the movie?
No, I haven't seen it
Okay.
yet. No. I guess it's top of mind. Because there are so many factors, business factors that can make it convenient for your client that 6 months or a year or 5 years later, oh, gee, we forgot to pay that. You have to be on top of that client.
Yeah.
You need, and it's nobody wants to be a pest. So for me to tell my attorney, keep on top of them,
Right.
audit their books,
Yeah.
and you always have to have audit rights. It's just a little invasive. It's a bit of a trouble. So royalties are not as juicy as you would think.
Yeah.
Equity, on the other hand, yes, you're taking a risk, and sometimes it'll pay off, and sometimes some of them have paid off for us, and others haven't. Some become worthless.
Yeah.
Especially in tech. You might think that this company that you're about to do work for has got the latest, greatest, all the best things that are going to change life forever. It's obsolete after a year.
Yeah.
Somebody else comes along with something better.
Right.
So you just have to really know. Like tonal, of course, we took stock in that. So that is just fundamental. It's elemental to being alive.
Yeah.
Exercise, food, eating, water, earth, air, all of these things are the elemental side of design. Usually those are very satisfying kinds of projects to work on.
Yeah. Would you say, especially, I don't know, I've maybe felt this a couple times where you have a client approach you and it feels very elemental or fundamental that what they're building is obviously needs to exist. And I feel like those are the moments where it feels much more enticing to take equity and kind of championing, the product from, kind of you're involved in it too. You have a stake in the game. I don't know how you feel, how you kind of parse through that.
I think it's if you have a product that should exist.
Yeah.
It does not necessarily mean it's going to be financially successful.
Okay.
You take stock when you think there's an upside potential for success. Sometimes if a project is so benevolent, it just needs to be done, we will do it for as much as we can get and not more.
Yeah.
Just because it has to be done.
Right. I'm curious also, how do you, now that you have a pretty large team, I would, at least on your website, maybe there's around 20 people, maybe you could correct me.
We're about 30.
30 now?
Yeah, we need to grow too. We're getting a lot of demand.
How do you structure your projects? How many projects do you take on at a time? Do you sit down at the beginning of the project and sketch with your fellow designers, and then I assuming they kind of take it to the next level and do the renderings and 3D work? I'm just kind of curious.
Yeah,
every studio has a little different, working structure. So.
Yeah, right. At any given moment, we have about 50 or 60 active projects.
Okay, that's a lot. Wow.
Some of them might be a few phone calls a week. There often be like 3 or 4 projects per client, but they are projects.
Yeah.
Individual projects. Each one needs attention.
Yeah.
In some manner or another. It needs tending to, maybe some management, expectation setting, or some incredibly deep deliverable that you need to provide. We establish a process. Each process is a little bit different for different clients. They generally start with, a deep immersion. We have to understand what's the problem, who's the end user, where are the opportunities, typical SWOT kind of analysis. We try to frame a solution that's pretty direct. We don't try to oversell. We don't need a program to be much larger than maybe it needs to be.
Mm-hmm.
I love design, but I am so bad at CAD that I just don't do it anymore.
Yeah.
So, but I can draw.
Yeah.
And my sketches are usually pretty descriptive. I put dimensions on everything. So,
Okay.
I mean, my designs, there'll be section views and exploded views and
Nice.
very complete.
Nice.
Perfect little perspectives.
Okay.
And I joke with my team. Somebody asked me, like, well, what CAD do you use? And I said, I'll use AutoCAD. People are like, I said this in a lecture to a school, and they're like, AutoCAD, isn't that some like old CAD program? I said, no, my AutoCAD is
It's
when
yourself.
I give a sketch to a designer and I stand behind them, and it automatically goes into CAD, which was like kind of a crappy thing to say. But when I work with my team, I love working with people, and I joke with them. We try all kinds of things, and I've got great people with amazing talent, and they can sometimes take a sketch of mine and just lift it up, by the time you get into CAD, and then I'll come around and we'll mess with details and change it, and I'll make all these different requests, and they come up with great stuff too to build on it.
Yeah.
Design is a journey. It's not just a wow, somebody thought of something and put it down. This is what a lot of young designers just don't seem to understand. You don't just suddenly come up with it and then put it in CAD and it's done. No, it's step by step. It's betterment. It's improvement. You discover what isn't working.
Yeah.
And you're one step at a time. It's a little bit of a game. You learn something. It's like, that's I call them truths. You establish a truth, and you begin to scaffold a problem, and it gets more and more refined, higher resolution, to the point you are beginning to perfect it. You keep refining. You keep going. You can always make something higher performance. You can always make it more beautiful.
Yeah.
You can always make it more sustainable. The point is, you have to be tenacious with it. You cannot give up. You can't just say, well, I'm tired of designing this thing. It's rigorous. Industrial design is it's still hard. I mean, the tools there are much better. Mm-hmm. They've streamlined things, CAD and 3D printing. I mean, I was dreaming about that stuff, at the beginning of my career.
Yeah. I love that insight onto kind of how you work day to day. I do want to just touch on Skrolla, just because I'm a big chair guy. I love chairs. Mm-hmm. I think many designers do. And Skrolla does seem like I don't know if I want to say passion project, but it seems like it was self-initiated by you, and you've built up a company around this chair. So I'm kind of curious what your plans are for that and how you envision the future of that.
Sure. A chair, to me, a lounge chair specifically, it's kind of the quintessential design problem. It always has been.
I love it. Yeah.
Like every architect has tried it, some successfully and some not. I mean, let's be honest. There's a lot of bad chairs out there, right? So I hadn't really, in my career, focused much on furniture. But it doesn't mean I'm not interested in it.
Mm-hmm.
I've been buying fine furniture for my whole life. I love it.
Yeah.
And I love materials. I love human factors. I like beautiful things. I like to create beautiful things. I do this for a living.
Of course.
And a chair embodies a lot of these things. I like that a chair has both positive and negative space. It's a little different than, say, a self-contained product like that typewriter or this phone. The negative space is maybe even more important, mm-hmm. because that's where your body is delivered. So I was like, I'm going to do a chair. So in my free time, I started sketching chairs, and I amassed probably 150 pages of chairs, and it got to a point where I was sort of inspired by this certain shape that kind of reminded me of like when you put your hands on your thighs when you sit down. And I wanted to, so that was the first little bit of inspiration, this kind of scroll-like shape. But I really set out to I was like, if I'm going to do a chair, it can't just be another chair. I should be able to get a patent on it. It should have a utility patent.
Okay.
On top of a design patent. I want to use as few parts as possible so that it's sustainable. I need to basically imbue it with everything I believe in as a designer. Of course, it had to be attractive.
Of course.
It had to be comfortable. It had to make a statement within a space. It had to be contemporary. And yet, in my case, I also wanted it to be a little bit referential to mid-century modern, which is my favorite era of furniture. I didn't set out to create a mid-century modern furniture piece. But one thing, like all the design projects, one thing leads to another. So I had a couple breakthroughs, I guess you could call them, where one is figuring out how to create this shape, because it's not bent wood. You can't bend wood that much.
Interesting. Okay.
Wood will bend, like a 90-degree corner, not bad. You can bring it almost all the way around, but to take the whole seat and bend it around. I thought of it, and this had been done before, but not very often, where you can take layers of epoxied veneer and place them inside a vacuum bag underneath a form that you then bring the wood around. It squeezes it against the form.
Yeah.
You let the epoxy set, then you remove the form, and you're left with the shape. Mm-hmm. So I found a group of furniture makers over in Oakland, across the water from where I was. And these guys were willing to try it. They're like, there's not a straight line on this chair, Dan. It's very fluid. It's very organic. We know what you're after, but we're recently out of the Redwood School of Furniture Design, so we're going to give this a go.
Okay.
They were incredible to work with.
That's amazing.
It's Vorath Design Works over in Oakland.
It's a beautiful chair.
Thanks. And so then we had to experiment with the seat. Once I got the seat to work, I was over in the shop and we drew this around the form, and I was so delighted when that thing popped out, because I stood up on it. I was trying to break it.
Yeah.
So then it was a matter of putting the other elements together. The other thing I really wanted is, again, in order to get a utility patent, you can't just assemble a chair like any other chair.
Right.
These legs go through holes in the seat and attach on the underside of the arm. Therefore, there's no need for an understructure to provide the cantilever twisting forces that every chair goes through. These four legs on this chair are being held back because this bar here is giving it the extra support. When you come all the way through the seat and attach underneath the arms, now you've got a box form. That was one thing that was new.
Yeah.
The other was the legs underneath the seat are a bigger diameter than the post coming through to the underside of the arm, which means that all of the weight of the person and the chair is sitting on a shoulder.
Yeah.
Which meant there was no fancy joinery needed. You lay that down and you push it in the hole and it attaches underneath the arm.
Beautiful.
And it's rock solid.
Yeah. Then
the back just stub tenon mortises into the back leg, so the back never touches the seat. It gave it. So then collectively, finally, the result was it gave it there was this handshake that I like, where the back is coming in through this hole in the back. If you look at the back of that chair, especially, it's super expressive. For something that's like a lounge chair, it can be expressive. Sometimes design, I don't want this to be this phone that I'm holding in my hand. I don't want this to be so expressive where I get so tired of it. But something like a chair that's decorative, that's in my home, it is the feature of the home. I have one in a house down in Carmel, and it's so you walk in, everybody says, "Oh my God, where'd you get that chair?"
I made it.
Because it's like it is the room.
Yeah.
It makes the room.
Well, I think what's beautiful about listening to you talk about the chair is when you see it for the first time, it's a beautiful molded plywood chair, but hearing the details about how the legs fit in and it's all structurally cohesive makes me love it even more. I think this is also something that I wish I would see more of in the design industry today, because when I look out into the furniture scene, especially in New York, we have a lot more of the art furniture, high design stuff.
Yeah.
It does tend to just be more art. There's not a lot of design and utility thinking into what is being built. And certainly there's merit on the art side of things, but yeah, I just love that you explained how those mortise and tenon, work for the backrest. And definitely, if you're watching this, we probably can put an image up, or you can check it out on the website. But
and by the way, on top of the construction method, which did get a utility patent, it had to be comfortable.
Of course.
A lot of designers forget that, especially in furniture.
Yeah.
So, of course, the dimensions are important. You have to honor that, in my opinion. So, the front edge is 14 inches off the floor. The back seat is 11. So it's accounted, about a 13-degree slant on the seat, but the arms are horizontal. If you wanted to put your phone or even, God forbid, you put a coffee on there, but if you did, it's not going anywhere on the arm. Having at least 100 degrees on the backrest was important. So that's all worked in. So when you sit in this chair, you can stay in that chair for a long time.
Yeah, and there's no cushion. It's all.
There's no cushion. There's an optional cushion that drops in there like a puzzle piece between those four legs. Mm-hmm. But I like it in its pure state.
Yeah, it looks beautiful. I mean, I think your idea of having that low, it's a really low seat, 11 inches on the back.
For the butt, yeah. It's a little bit like, not quite as steep as an Adirondack chair. Mm-hmm. But for a very comfortable chair, 11 at the back of the seat, the bottom of the seat is actually very comfortable and not that unusual.
Yeah.
For like one of these, great lounge chair. Mm-hmm. Remember, it's a lounge chair.
Yeah.
It's not a dining chair.
And then in terms of Skrolla's business plan, you've started this chair and you're going to, I'm assuming you're going to build a business around it, or how is that going to?
Well, good question. They're for sale. They are expensive. They're like $7,500 a piece, but these are all handmade mm-hmm. by artisans, and they come in beautiful walnut, teak, ash. If you want to do a custom finish, that's cool. we did a white one. I thought was kind of strange looking.
Interesting. Okay. Painted or like whitewash?
No. It used a conversion varnish. It used like a pickled dye, a white dye. You can still see the grain of the wood. It's beautiful, but it's just not nearly as nice as the teak. Mm-hmm. I like the teak. It really works well. Oh, the other thing that was really cool is instead of using veneer all the way through, hardwood veneer, the core veneers are bending poplar.
Okay.
So it's cheap and it's lightweight. The whole chair weighs, how much would you think that chair weighs?
Oh, maybe.
It's a large format lounge chair.
I would say 150.
It weighs
pounds?
19 pounds.
What? How much?
19 pounds.
Oh, I'm way off.
You can pick it up with your baby finger.
Wow, that's a lightweight chair.
Yeah, so it's lightweight. So I really wanted it to also be, like I said, as sustainable as possible. It is a chair, and these, anytime you make anything, you need to be aware of its impact.
Yeah,
even
for sure.
A paperclip is an environmental impact. You have to be aware of that as an industrial designer. Everything makes an impact.
Yeah.
By the way, that started me out. So to answer your question about the chair, they're for sale. Right now, they're kind of a boutique-y kind of product.
For sure, made to order.
Eventually, mm-hmm. It will likely, because it's fairly new and not that many people know about it, but, if we'll see. I have an open mind. You have to just always keep an open mind. To me, it wasn't the end game. I didn't have an end game other than to actualize on a vision that I had. That's it.
Yeah.
That's important.
I feel like I agree. It's like sometimes you have this great idea and you just have to make it.
You just have to make it. Yeah. It was sitting on one of the shelves of my mind. Yeah. And what good is it up there gathering dust? I had to get it out.
I feel that too. You've seen them all. I got plenty of.
Yeah, that's the other thing. Do not, if there are any students listening, if you have it starts as like a little tiny dream and a notion, just make it happen. Just do it.
Yeah. I'm all about that. I love that. If we have some more time, Dan, I don't know. I know you're a busy man. We could get into some questions or some topics.
Let's do it.
So I have this written down here.
I was going to show you a chair. I'm not going to show the camera.
Okay.
It's
you want to pull it up? That's fine.
The next one.
Oh, okay. I get the exclusive look.
This is exclusive. Nobody's seen this yet.
We're just going to tease the listeners here.
This one is kind of the opposite. Uses steel and a recycled plastic. It's very different. But don't say anything about what you're looking at there.
Wow. Okay. Wow. Oh, that's amazing. Okay.
It's very different, right?
It's very different. That's beautiful. That's a statement piece for sure.
This is super comfortable. Again,
the
right angles. This just hugs you.
Oh, I'm sure the listeners are just dying right now.
Yeah, that's why I did this. A little bit of showtime here. But yeah, this one is one's coming.
Let's keep a lookout for that. What
This is the back view.
Oh yeah, that's beautiful. Wow.
Thanks.
That's amazing, Dan. I'm excited to see you branch out into furniture. So
yeah, actually that led to Ancient Ritual. Have you seen this on our website?
Yes. Oh, it's a recent one.
It was announced like 2 weeks ago or something.
This is like a sauna type.
It's an experiential sauna. It was inspired by, one is a startup came to us with this big idea, but I think these guys were inspired by the fact that we all need more downtime. We need some internal peace. And their idea was, can we create a little individual environment that encourages one to just truly relax, improve your sleep, improve your health, bring mind and body together. So we created this. It's like a chamber. It sounds weird, but it's a small chamber you get inside. Mm-hmm. It is a piece of furniture. It's all Hinoki cypress from Japan. It's a sustainable wood.
Wow.
There's heat. There's chroma therapy.
Yeah, beautiful
we
lights.
Used light on the walls. It feels like you were in a place with no dimension when you're inside this thing because of what's happening with the light and the details. It's very personal. It's soft.
Is it actually a sauna, or is it more about like a warm, calming
No, it's
environment?
actually a sauna.
Okay.
There are IR transmitters on the walls.
Okay.
There's a heater in the ceiling.
Okay.
Yeah, check it out. It's called Ancient Ritual.
It's beautiful. Yeah, I mean, it's super simple, and it seems like I would love to try it out one day. I checked it out on the website. All right, Dan. Yeah, I'm kind of curious. So we have a few topics down here. We have some from your team that says trends in design outside of AI, and we could talk about AI, but I think I think we've probably talked about it enough in past episodes, and you have your own podcast, and I've heard your thoughts on it. I'm kind of curious, are there any other trends that you're seeing in design that maybe aren't as apparent that you are kind of interested in? I think also, living in San Francisco, you're in the tech hub, you kind of see the new tech coming up. I don't know, curious about your thoughts on that.
Well, interesting enough, I wouldn't answer with trends on technology. As a matter of fact, technology is almost like a foregone conclusion. Everybody expects the technology. So if anything, what I'm enjoying that designers, including us, what we're trying to do is kind of celebrate the technology by not necessarily upfront celebrating it, like push it in the back seat, let it influence the driver, and provide much more techno ambience. Just the feeling that the tech is there, the magic is there, but let the experience drive the solution. Let the human element, the tactile element, maybe the whatever the end user's state of mind at the time of use, at the time of consumption of that technology, let that moment drive the design.
Right.
So what that means is a lot of products are using more natural materials, like we've been discussing. Designs have become maybe a little bit more humble. That's kind of nice. They don't have to be in your face all the time. Sometimes I want design to be present. I want it to carry values. I want to be proud of it if it is, or maybe appropriately, I want to identify with it. Like I want it to fit within my life.
Yeah.
So I think design in that way is becoming a little bit more respectful. I think it's slowly becoming more sustainable. I'm glad to hear that clients asking for sustainability.
Yeah.
Is it a trend yet? No, but it's getting closer.
Yeah.
I'm happy to see. There is a continuation of this reductionist trend that companies like Braun started a long time ago and Apple continued.
Yeah. I'm curious that you've said reductionist as opposed to minimalist. Do you have a distinction there, or?
I have a distinction because a lot of times when you're doing reductionist design, you are taking things away. You're reducing. You're not. It's oftentimes reducing not just the amount of material, it's the mass, it's the volume, but it's also the various steps you have to go through to make something. You're reducing. You're taking things away. It ends up sometimes being minimal, but I think it's more proactive to say it's reductionist.
I like that. Yeah, because it could be it could still be a statement piece, but the way you got there was a really simple way of manufacturing or something.
Yes.
Yeah.
To
Okay.
reduce is a verb.
Right.
Minimalism is a noun.
Yeah.
Minimal is a noun.
Okay.
Or a state.
Yeah.
And I think it makes it more active when you're constantly thinking about reduction. You have to be careful if you're thinking that way as you are reducing, not to take the soul out of whatever you're creating.
Yeah.
And you have to be deeply aware of, like, what is the effect of what you're about to propose to the end user? What are you doing to this design? And whatever your path is that's going to get you to your solution, you need to be aware of every little decision that you make as you are reducing or increasing or adding or subtracting or multiplying. It should be an intelligent act that is rational and using reason, while at the same time, on a different track, just like railroad tracks, there is a sense of emotion and joy and delight, and how can I keep the end user engaged with whatever this thing is I'm proposing that they consume. Other trends, I think people are finally starting to question what it means to be a consumer. I think consumers they're becoming a little bit more responsible.
Yeah.
They're aware of the things that they're producing, and I think the pandemic probably alerted everybody to the fact that it's not about quantity of life, it's about quality of life. If you think about, like, quality of life, everything that you interact with, the people in your life, the experiences, the things that you purchase, are they making a contribution? When you're thinking about quality of life, or when quality of life isn't so great, when you're wearing a mask and you go into the store and everybody's bleak.
Right.
And the future doesn't look great.
Yeah, it gives you some perspective. Yeah.
It gives you perspective, and it just reminds you that good, timeless design, that even maybe sometimes you have to pay a little bit more for, but something you want to keep for a longer time, that's important. So I think quality of life and quality of design really go well together.
I hope that's the trend,
I don't know if I can call it a trend yet, but I am definitely seeing it because we're getting more inquiries about, like, quality of life related products.
Yeah. I mean, there definitely was, certainly during the pandemic, a big, I would say, rethinking of what we have in our home, just because we were spending so much time in our home. And I can see that kind of manifesting itself in the next decade or so.
But by the way, AI, yes.
AI, of course.
That's huge. I don't know what it's going to do to the field of design. It's definitely going to influence it. It is now. Right now, we're all excited about it.
Yeah.
It feels magic. What
it does.
It can do.
I am curious. I was listening to one of your podcasts, and you said ADI, artificial design intelligence.
Yeah.
So I'm just kind of curious why you made that distinction, or if that was something that you've heard before.
I mean, it's ADI is generative AI.
Okay, so you're just kind of referring to
AI. I think people just
design.
Generally, when people talk about AI, Chat GPT-4,
right.
There's not enough talked about AI, and when it comes to creativity.
Yes. Okay.
In our definition of creativity.
Yeah.
So I guess I was referring to ADI is to get a little bit more specific.
Yeah.
And the effect it's going to have on how we create.
How have you all been using the tools currently? Are you, using generative image technology at the studio to kind of inspire new ideas? Are you using chatbots to, bounce, different ideas off I don't know, the artificial intelligence? Have you kind of dove into that, or are you just kind of seeing it from a broader level?
One is it's not advanced enough to just give your prompts and, like, boom, there's something that's really quite appropriate. You get some pretty if you're working on a design project and you put in 10 words, or even a lot more than that, what you're going to get out is kind of garbagey right now. So it's a bit of a joke. And we actually have passed around images like, we might be working on some kind of device, and you try to produce that. It's not going to come out how you expect.
Right.
How we're using it carefully is producing environments that can help to define the context of something. Because sometimes when you're designing a product, a lot of times, let's say you're in SolidWorks or Rhino, or it's floating around in this environment, and to put it in context early helps you understand. And again, closing imagination gap in the design process is a lot about that.
I love that. That's interesting.
So just seeing it, you could take your product and like put it in the hands of an AI person, or an AI environment of use ultimately, and it changes your idea right away.
Yeah,
changes how your perception of whether or not this is a good concept or not.
Of course. I mean, designs don't exist in a vacuum. They exist in our lives. They need to have context. Yeah, I love that. That's a great
I just
tip.
Believe very much in context, and that's something that designers don't necessarily think enough about.
Mm-hmm.
Context can be one of your truth cornerstones that you build to, like, okay, that environment of use is not going to change.
Right.
Let it influence your design. Accept that it will influence it. Accept it. You just have to accept it.
Yeah.
To me, designers are like, no, people are going to love this because look how beautiful it is.
In the white background, Les Manouche render, it's just like perfect, with lighting. I agree. I love that, Dan. That's some great insight there. We have some questions here from our podcast listeners, and then I have a few closing questions. But I thought this one was interesting, and it's certainly a tougher question, but this one comes from Kerosene. They say, how do you feel about the moral implications of designing products that you may or may not have aligned values with? And they reference, you've worked on some, your team's worked on some, I guess, gaming slot machines for like electronic slot machines for casinos and places like that. So I'm kind of curious to hear about that and how you approach those type of projects.
I love these kind of questions when it comes to design ethics.
Yeah.
Designers do have a lot of responsibility. You have to think about the impact that your product, your solutions are providing to people. Actually, in like 2005, we were approached by a slot machine company, IGT. They were the biggest in the world at the time. And we had no interest.
Yeah.
Honestly, at first we had no interest.
Yeah.
Like, I've never gambled. Like, I don't even like those machines. So we did a quick investigation because they really liked us. They're like, we love the fact that you haven't designed these, but we like the way you think as designers. We think you can really change this industry for the better. Mm-hmm. And we went down to see a casino. I hadn't been in very many.
Where did you go? Did you go to
Vegas?
Vegas, okay.
Yeah. And I noticed terrible human factors. I noticed people being addicted to the machine just because of the fact that there was this hope that they were going to win.
Right.
Speakers that were like glommed on like Mickey Mouse ears, and terrible video experience. The human factors on the keyboards. People were leaning against this coin tray, which haven't dropped coins in decades.
Okay. Dusty, yeah.
But their women's and men's shins were bruised because they were leaning against this thing. I thought, this is ridiculous. Somebody needs to do something about this.
Yeah.
We were probably the least likely to get that project. They interviewed a lot of firms. I liked these people very much. One of the guys became a good friend. They were a leader in this industry. So we said, if you let us start from the carpet and work our way up, we'll see what we can do. Our objective was not to provide an addictive machine that encouraged more gambling, but it was to provide an entertainment experience that had value to people. Mm-hmm. So we did what a lot of designers would have done. We made the design cool, flush displays, integrated speakers, much better interaction models with the keyboard and the control of monies going in and prints coming out, and having an understanding of where you are throughout the game.
Yeah.
So you don't overspend. And then we wanted to see what we could do with this industry by just elevating it. One machine led to the next, and then we began working with one of our favorite clients. They're amazing people, Aristocrat. We also worked with AGS at the time, and we've since designed quite a few of the machines. And indeed, the effect that we have had on that industry is enormous.
Yeah.
40% of the machines now we have designed, if you walk in any casino.
Wow.
Aristocrat went from like number 3 or 4 to number 1. They are the ones that are fun, that are tall, and every detail is worked out. We've had so much fun designing these things. They are not the beasts that everybody thinks they are.
Yeah.
And they are bringing a lot of people entertainment and delight. And that is one thing that design can do for people.
Yeah.
On the one hand, you want design to be this altruistic activity where you are saving lives.
Sure, yeah.
We've designed surgical products.
Yeah.
Surgical products where we are asked to help conceptualize how a surgery is done. We are not doctors, but we like to figure stuff out. That's one side of design, this kind of like enabling life, supporting it, letting it unfold in the kindest manner possible, really creating meaningful design. That's of course what we like to do. But there's also this thing about entertainment and delight. We are humans, and being alive, for the short period of time that we have on this planet,
right?
You want to have a good time,
for sure, definitely.
And design can help that.
Yeah.
Again, I use the word help. It's like,
I think that's such an interesting story, and I also appreciate the question that was asked, just because, I think there is often this time of like, I've heard this advice before, and I think it comes especially from, in school, people will ask, well, what if, a company isn't sustainable? Should I work with that company? And I think designers, it's almost like designers are afraid to work for companies that, aren't sustainable or maybe not have the same values, but that's the companies we should be helping out. It's like we have those, elements to bring them closer to that goal of being sustainable or providing entertainment value or whatever it may be. It's not like when a client approaches you if you turn them away, it's not like they close down their business. It's not like this thing where they just disappear. They're going to go to another designer who maybe won't do a job or maybe doesn't care as much as you do. So I don't know. I thought that was a really great question.
This whole dichotomy of being an industrial designer where you are asked to help create more products that sell more in higher volumes works against almost all sustainability values.
Yeah.
Almost all of them.
And that's always a tough thing, especially when, James and I, it's hard to talk about sustainability just because it feels like this hypocritical topic coming from a designer who just makes products and produces a ton of products. But I think,
you don't.
You
usually don't.
Right. You're making
your client is, and you're advising on how to do this right.
Right. Yeah.
It is incumbent upon you as a designer to make sure that you're using as little material as possible. Again, what we were talking about before, to make it so that people want it for longer periods of time in their life.
Yeah.
So it's used for a much longer period of time because of its other values and goodness.
Right.
That it uses the right kinds of materials. You're supposed to bring your knowledge to the table as a designer.
Yeah.
So that if something has a higher likelihood to have, for example, microplastics in it or any kind of hazardous materials. It's up to you to bring that accountability to the fore.
Yeah.
You have to do it. And we work with this company, TP-Link, and we started working with them. They were like number 10 in the industry, networking industry.
Right. They make routers and Wi-Fi adapters.
And they're number 1 now.
Wow. Okay.
They're like 40% market share. It's crazy of networking products. They produce upwards of 3 million units a month.
Oh, wow.
A month.
It's insane.
So they ask us to design, and they're open to sustainability. Now, sustainability to them also means they save more money because we're using less plastic.
For sure, yeah.
In order to get them to understand that sustainability is a strong value that they should have, we needed to turn sustainability into a monetary factor to make sure they understood, hey, you're saving 5 cents for each one of these 3 million units you're selling a month.
Yeah, combining parts and making things automated. Yeah, I think
Yeah, it's just the simplification, the reduction.
Right.
We're talking about reductionism, and yeah, so we have these responsibilities.
Yeah.
But it's something. I mean, there have been times in my career where something has been produced where I'm like, man, I'm seeing it in the dumps.
Right.
I remember pulling a toaster out of a dumpster once that I worked on. I recognized the corner of it in a sea of junk in this dumpster, and I reached down and pulled on the cable, the power cable, and lifted it out. It was a Sunbeam toaster. I lifted it up and looked at it like it was a dead animal.
Oh my gosh.
It was used for a long period of time. It was yellow. It had a patina on it. That's something I designed at Frog. And at first I was like, oh my God, when you see the death of one of your products, when you see that full circle like that, it's humbling.
Yeah.
It really makes you think. Like the one little saving moment there for me was the crumbs were falling out of it. And I thought of all the families that had their breakfast and the kids that grew up using this. And, there was a lot of good brought through it.
Right.
It allowed a piece of life to unfold in a way. And whether that's good design or bad design, it will be produced.
Right.
Humankind loves to make stuff.
Yeah.
And the better we make it, I think the better off we will be, and the more responsible and accountable we are as designers, the better.
That's a beautiful statement for that end of that question. Dan, I want to just maybe get to the end here and wrap it up. We always like to ask kind of one last question for every interviewee, and that is, what are you excited about for the future? In design, in life, what are the things that you are, building towards and excited for?
That's a great question.
Because we got to end it on a happy note. From the toaster.
Yeah, I was gonna. So I'm gonna go from that happy question to an unhappy answer back to a happy answer.
Okay,
How's
let's
that?
hear it. Yeah.
I always thought, even when I was a little kid, and when I first saw, when I was very young, 2001: A Space Odyssey. I've in my mind's eye, I have always thought that the future was going to be better and better and better, and I was thinking that someday there will be a utopia.
Right.
Man, after you live a life of designing a lot of stuff and seeing how screwed up this planet is, I don't feel that way anymore. We're heading more toward a dystopic state. Let's face it. We are. Hopefully technology will save it. Hopefully we wake up. I'm not saying us wake up. That's the problem. I guess I always thought that good design, and I mean that in the most general sense, somebody asked me what design was in front of a television camera, and I kind of froze, because it's kind of like asking somebody what is life?
Sure, yeah.
Design to me is a big thing. It's means creativity to me. It means creating plans for some kind of betterment, whether it's an individual thing you're working on or a system, or rethinking the nature of a company. Design is just a big word to me. I always thought that design would help us get to this utopic state. But I sometimes feel like Sisyphus. I'm always pushing that rock up. I'm like, okay, we did our little part.
Yeah.
As Steve Jobs said, you got to make a dent in this planet. I kind of feel like we do. And then I'll see the dumbest thing come out on the market, or a client will sometimes on purpose do something to something we design where it's like, come on.
Yeah. Yeah, tough.
That can be frustrating. Nonetheless, now let's come back up the hill.
Okay.
I'm a little bit afraid of AI, but there's so much potential in it. Mm-hmm. There's also a lot of potential in the hardware and software that will allow it to really work well. That's quantum computing, especially. We are working on a quantum computer right now that's going to be quite stunning.
Okay.
I think I can show it. It might be 6 months or a year before I can show it, but it's very cool. It's coming. The amount of information that we are going to be able to process through that, and the amount of hopefully corrective AI, not just, and what I mean by that is almost like you think of, there's going to be malware for AI.
Mm-hmm.
We will be able to correct a lot of the stupid things that AI is going to do.
Yeah.
AI will try to crash planes and take
Right.
the grid down, and yes, it's going to do a lot of bad people behind AIs too.
And it's
AI
like
too.
every new technology, whether it's fire or
Yes.
nuclear, it's like there are going to be bad parts of it, but hopefully the good outweighs the bad.
So I hope that technology will help to right humanity in some ways. I don't rely on it. I don't think it's going to be the ultimate lifting affordance. One of the keys, of course, is education. I'm really not seeing our educational system evolve to the point. I think it needs like a quantum shift. We need a new way of learning things. We probably have to abandon some of the ways that we feel about education. We have to abandon or severely shift our description of what it means to be prosperous. This capitalist notion of prosperity meaning pretty much only gain more income absolutely must be refocused in providing outcome for humans.
Yeah.
Outcome and more meaningful products, ideas, software, hardware, so that people can get on with their lives and have a quality life. We've got to fix this planet. I'm not seeing a lot of action there.
Okay.
I'm not.
Yeah.
But I do believe in human ingenuity.
Yeah.
I don't always believe in. No, that's not true. I was going to say I don't believe in human intelligence. That would be crazy. It's amazing how brilliant human beings are. And I'm hoping that the more artful side of our humanity exposes itself and begins to make some of the important decisions that will drive a more positive future.
Yeah.
In other words, the soul and character of artists, craftspeople, writers, poets,
And designers.
and designers,
Yeah.
of course, put us right in there. That sensitivity toward making a good life, or understanding like how to really connect with people, needs to elevate.
Yeah.
It needs to influence more about the bigger decisions made on our planet. So yeah, I guess I'm carefully optimistic.
Okay. Yeah, that's fine.
I think that's
your
because
realism
if
kicking
I
in.
was all rosy, I'd be lying to you. And
That's the George Nelson coming in and giving you a little bit of a perspective.
I thought, what a cranky old man. So I don't want to become that. And I'm not. I'm super, like on all these projects I work on, I am Mr. Optimism. I think that's what it's going to take. Every individual to say, we can do better.
Yeah.
And I'm hoping that there's ultimately some kind of, I don't know, just more of a collective consciousness that we can all agree on.
Yeah.
That's maybe the hardest part, is agreeing on a way forward.
Well, Dan, it was amazing talking to you, and I know our listeners just gained a ton of knowledge, and appreciate the time that you've spent sharing all your stories. I'm almost speechless. I mean, you've had an amazing career, and I again appreciate all the insights you've shared. So I think maybe just to end it, I think we definitely want to shout out Whipsaw, amazing design team there, and amazing work coming out. And also you have your own podcast, so make sure you all go and check that out, subscribe to that. And I don't know if you have any last words, Dan, but I'll hand it over to you. And
that was a lot of words. I don't know.
Okay,
last
you're good.
I don't like last words. I like the first words and the words in the middle.
That's
where all the good stuff is, right? I really enjoyed talking to you. I must say you did a great job.
Oh, thanks.
This was a pleasure for me to do. So it's my honor to do it.
Awesome. Well, thanks, Dan. And as always, I'm Nick. Later.
I'm Dan. Later. Thank you for joining.